Good evening. A jury has ruled that a bus driver was driving dangerously when he caused the deaths of a 7-year-old boy and a 76-year-old woman.
Kailash Chander, a former mayor of Leamington Spa, was diagnosed with dementia after his vehicle ploughed into the side of a Sainsbury's supermarket in 2015. Well, our reporter Melissa Wright has been following the case. She joins us live now from Birmingham Crown Court. And Melissa, this is a desperately sad case that's finally come to an end.
It certainly is. It's been almost 3 years since that day when 2 people were killed and 2 were seriously injured in the fatal crash. Well, today police released CCTV of that moment. It clearly shows the panic of people rushing away from the bus, bystanders trying to warn others, and the moment that it finally came crashing into Sainsbury's, all in the heart, of course, of Coventry city centre. Well, the driver on that day, Mr. Kailash Chander, is now 80 years old. He was ruled mentally unfit to stand trial or enter a plea on account of post-traumatic stress disorder and a form of dementia. Well, this was a trial of the facts. The jury weren't returning a verdict of innocent or guilty, but instead ruling on whether Mr. Chander did the acts alleged. Well, they spent 3 hours deliberating today and then found that Mr. Chander had been driving dangerously when he caused the death of 2 people, 7-year-old Rowan Fitzgerald, 76-year-old Dora Hancox. Well, she was walking past at the time. She died of multiple injuries after being hit by the bus and a falling lamppost. Her daughter told us she never thought her mother would go in that way.
She didn't deserve to die like that. You expect old age, being ill, not in those circumstances. She already got ill a few years back where we thought she was going to die. That was for illness. And she was strong and she pulled through because they all said she's not going to make it. And she did. So to be run down by a bus, she didn't have a chance.
Well, during the trial here, the jury heard that Mr. Chander had been warned about his erratic driving and that he'd had 4 accidents in the 3 years leading up to the crash, which ultimately proved fatal. Coventry reduced to chaotic confusion. In these scenes from the 3rd of October 2015, a double-decker bus has just ploughed off the road and smashed into a supermarket, driven by 77-year-old Kailash Chander, a former mayor of Leamington Spa. The bus Mr. Chander was driving was the X18. It was meant to turn right into Trinity Street, but instead it continued straight on. Witnesses described how the double-decker bus felt out of control. It finally came to a halt after ploughing into the Sainsbury's supermarket in a crash which cost 2 people their lives. 7-year-old Rowan Fitzgerald was on the top deck and died at the scene. 76-year-old pedestrian Dora Hancox was also caught up in the crash. She too was killed. During the trial, it was alleged that Mr. Chander, seen here at an earlier hearing, had worked 3 consecutive 75-hour weeks before the crash. The prosecution suggested that during the incident, he had held his foot down on the throttle pedal instead of the brake, and that caused the bus to accelerate out of control. The only possible explanation they suggested was that Mr. Chander had become confused over the controls of the bus. Casper Mudenya was a passenger on board and described his encounter with Mr. Chander moments before the crash.
I pulled my return ticket, passed it to the driver, and he was shaking, when I passed the ticket, he was shaking. But you don't know what's going to happen. It's the simplest task. Maybe it's me, but it's not something that you struggle in doing. So the fact that he couldn't just punch a ticket, get a ticket, punch it, give it back, and I'm in. It raises some questions.
Kailash Chander was found medically unfit to enter a plea or stand trial on 2 counts of death by dangerous driving and 2 of causing serious injury. Instead, proceedings took the form of a trial of the facts, working to establish the truth of allegations rather than Mr. Chander's guilt or innocence. During the trial, the jury heard that Mr. Chander had been involved in 4 incidents in the 3 years before this crash. Prosecutor Andrew Thomas QC said that one incident in 2012 had seen Mr. Chander strike a piece of street furniture, with another the same year seeing him reverse into another bus at the depot. The jury heard that the following year Mr Chander was involved in a rear-end collision with a car, although only minor damage was caused. And they heard that in 2014 Mr Chander struck a gate while returning to the depot, damaging panels and windows on his bus. Casper, caught up in 2015's fatal incident, feels his life was put at risk.
Before this happened, I was like, getting into a bus is the safest place, because you have no doubt something will happen as major as that. Of course, accidents happen, but when it's something major and the way it was, you wouldn't expect that.
So, Melissa, we now know some of the background to this case. What happens next?
Well, Mr Chander's employers, Midland Red South, will be sentenced in late November. They've already pleaded guilty to health and safety offences for allowing him to keep driving despite warnings about his competence and tiredness. Earlier this evening, they said they were deeply sorry for the heartbreak of those affected, and that they've made it their continuing priority to work closely with authorities to learn detailed lessons. Well, the family of 7-year-old Rowan Fitzgerald, the other victim, of course, released their own statement tonight. They said that the findings give them no satisfaction and that no sentence would ever stop the hurt we feel, they say. We have real concerns that the death of Rowan and Dora will not be the last if laws are not reassessed, they add. We want to see something positive come from this. We feel this will only come from a change in law on bus drivers' age and hours of work. This would prevent anyone having to go through what we have gone through, they say. They add that they'll be speaking to their local MP to see this addressed in law.
Melissa, thank you.
Other news, a father has gone on